Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the channel. My name is Ursula Bielski. If you're new here, thank you so much for stopping by. Today, I'm doing a book review about one of the most life-changing, actually probably the most life-changing book I've ever read, next to the Bible, of course. And that is this book right here, The Unseen Realm by Dr. Michael Heiser, who just passed away a couple of weeks ago. And that has been a great loss to the entire world, as far as I'm concerned. Dr. Heiser's work was so influential and has changed so many people's understanding of Jesus, of Christianity, of Judaism, and of God himself. I can't tell you how my relationship and my relationship with an understanding of God has changed since I read this book and have listened also. Dr. Heiser has thousands of hours of free content on the internet. He had a podcast called the Naked Bible Podcast. And that term, the Naked Bible, comes from his passion, which was the revisiting of the Old Testament in particular, also the New Testament, but primarily the Old Testament of the Bible, to look at the original, to look at the writings in the Bible with the original languages. So he's an ancient languages scholar and he's an Old Testament scholar. And so what he did was to look at primarily what he called the weird stuff in the Bible that most of us just gloss over, especially Catholics like me and a lot of you who grew up not even being encouraged to read the Bible. We're so unfamiliar with most of the Old Testament. We're familiar with very little even of the actual text of the New Testament, only what we hear at Mass. And so really, going into and starting to read the Bible in the past few years, which I started to do during the pandemic, like millions of other people, I have come for the first time in my life to an understanding not only of the story of the Old Testament and its relationship to the New Testament, but also an incredibly deep understanding of God's love for us, God the Father, that I never really understood before. Like most Christians, I saw, and Father Chris Alar just talked about this in his homily this morning from the National Shrine of the Divine Mercy, the live stream Mass this morning, talked about, that we have this idea. So many Christians have this idea of like that the Old Testament God and the New Testament God are different. We see Jesus, gentle and kind with the little children, the classic pictures from the New Testament, peace, love, and all of that. And then we see this terrifying God of the Old Testament who, was always angry, doling out wrath and vengeance and everything else, and instructing his followers to murder, millions of people. And we don't connect the two at all, let alone understand that they're actually the same being, and that Jesus is the incarnation of God the Father. They are the same being. And we have to understand that, and just understand that that the Old Testament was a time for that personality of God. And we have to understand what was going on there and why there was so much trouble and violence and war and killing in the Old Testament. And in order to do that, by revisiting that with Dr. Heiser, this whole understanding opens up, and it includes the understanding of a lot of things that myself as a Catholic never even really heard about before. I mean, I had heard the words in my mind, these words, beings, whatever, were filed away in the back of my head as some sort of mythological creatures or something. But these weird things, these weird creatures, these weird beings, these weird events in the Bible are part of the Bible, and we need to understand them, learn about them, accept them, and put them in context with everything else that we understand about the history of salvation, going back to Adam and Eve. A key part of all of this is the understanding of what happened in Genesis chapter 6 And this is a this is a verse in the Bible, and there are verses in chapter 6 that talk about these beings called the sons of God that saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took them as wives, mated with them. And so essentially in Genesis 6, we see the sons of God, who Dr. Heiser explains are angels, that come down to earth and mate with human women. And this actually happened. Catholics don't talk about this at all. I mean, this is something that's completely skimmed over. We focus on Adam and Eve and the fall of man there, and then the rest of it is kind of just the history of that. But as Dr. Heiser explains, there were three separate rebellions in the Old Testament. The first was the rebellion in the Garden of Eden, the rebellion of Adam and Eve. The second rebellion was the rebellion of the angels, the fallen angels, the sons of God, who came down to earth and mated with human women. They left their proper station and their proper place in violation of God's will for them. And they came down to earth and they mated with human women. And they created, let me just finish that thought up. The third rebellion happens at the Tower of Babel, when mankind decides they're going to build a tower to reach heaven. They're going to be like God. And some horrible things happen after that too, which Dr. Heiser gets deeply into. But there's a race of people that is a race of beings, I should say, that's produced by the mating of the fallen angels with human women. And those were the Nephilim. And these were the giants that roamed the earth, that even when Moses sent scouts ahead to the promised land, they found Nephilim living in the promised land. And this was an issue all throughout the Old Testament, where the seed of these fallen angels and human women infected the human bloodline. And this is why, as Dr. Heiser explains, you see all of these strange passages in the Old Testament where God is instructing, everyone to be killed. And, we see this with Noah, where he wipes out everything on the earth except Noah and his family and two of each of the animals. All of these things we see as Dr. Heiser unfolds the Old Testament in light of the original languages and the meanings of the original words, that God was attempting to remove this tainted, abominable bloodline from the human race, in particular, because Jesus was going to come. He was going to be incarnated as Jesus, and the human bloodline could not be tainted with the blood of the fallen angels when this happened. It had to be a pure human bloodline. Jesus had to be fully human in order to redeem us humans. So it's fascinating to go and read the Old Testament in light of these revelations that God had this purpose and plan that goes back to Genesis 6. And what we saw at the Tower of Babel, when mankind once again rebelled and tried to be like God, was that God split up. We all spoke, when we were in Catholic school or Christian school or Sunday school when we were kids, we were taught that the Tower of Babel incident was when, the nations were divided and different languages began, right? Well, Dr. Heiser goes on to explain in this book and much of his other work that at the Tower of Babel, God split up the people into nations and scattered them over the earth. Yes. But at that time, he also, and this is in the Bible, but we gloss over it, he put in charge of each one of the nations one of the sons of God, many of whom are fallen angels. We know this from Genesis 6. So at least some, if not all, of the nations are under the control and guidance of demonic beings. They're not actually demons. We find out too that demons are actually the spirits of the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim who died, they're barred from heaven, of course, because they're not human. And they're not angels. So they're barred from heaven. They roam the earth, so that we have fallen angels like Satan and his minions, and we have demons roaming the earth. So it's kind of wild. There's so much that Dr. Heiser goes into in this book that goes all the way through the Old Testament and through the New Testament and the coming of Jesus the Messiah, right up to the point right before Jesus goes to Jerusalem to die, when he takes his disciples to the mountaintop and he declares the beginning of the salvation of mankind. You know, he basically says, on this rock, I will build my church. And, you know, Peter becomes the first pope, and Jesus goes to Jerusalem to complete his mission here on earth and to die and be risen and save us all. Thank you, Jesus. But that mountain where Jesus took his disciples was, and you can see this in local folklore and mythology, that was the very mountain where the fallen angels, the sons of God, came down to earth to mate with human women. So it's really insane when you see the whole story rolled out by Dr. Heiser, who was able to unlock this incredible story just by going back to the original texts and figuring out what those words and phrases actually meant to the ancient civilization, because there's no way that we can understand this by looking at it all through our modern eyes. And that was the foundation of Dr. Heiser's entire career. And he was so great at it. So I'm going to give away a copy of this book. You can go into the hat, if you will, or your name could go into the hat by just commenting below here, anything, say hi, say thanks, say have a great day, say cool, I'm going to check it out, anything. I'll be doing a drawing this weekend, and then on This Present Darkness next Tuesday, I will announce the winner of the book, and I'll get it shipped out to you. I'll get your address and get it shipped out to you. And then if you don't win, I hope you do check out the book yourself. It's one of the best-selling Christian books of modern times. And there is Dr. Heiser also published another book called Supernatural that he said was the Unseen Realm light, because the Unseen Realm is a bit of a scholarly book with a lot of notes and references and things, but it's so accessible and so easy to read that I don't think you need to read Supernatural, the Unseen Realm Light. I don't think you need to go to Supernatural. I would go to the original. It's really worth your while, and it's not difficult to read at all. But do check out, I'm going to put a link to a 4-part lecture series that Dr. Heiser did for Celebration Church, a Christian church here in the United States, where he lays it all out, his whole thing. And I highly recommend, especially now during Lent, that you check this out. It is going to blow your mind. It's going to change the way you think about everything. And it's going to really open your eyes to the fact of God's relentless love for us. And so please do check it out. Thanks so much for being here. I hope you've enjoyed this book review. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you get notified of more to come. A little bit later this week, probably tomorrow, I'm going to have some St. Patrick's Day recipes for you on Ghosts in the Kitchen. And on Saturday, I'm going to have a recipe for bread rolls for St. Joseph's Day. So make sure you check that out. If you're watching much later, you can just look those up on my playlist. And I hope you stay here on my channel for a bit and enjoy everything that's here. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you guys so much. You really keep me going every day. It's always wonderful to be with you. My name's Ursula Bielski. Remember to pray for ghosts.